This is the I Love Tattooing podcast. Welcome, everybody. I'm Clay, and I'm here with
Jack,
my partner Jack from Orlando, and we own and operate Atomic Tattoos in Central Florida. I'm in the Tampa Bay area. Jack is in the Orlando area, and we both are tattooers who run and own tattoo shops. We have multiple locations, and we have a kind of walk-in custom shop business model where you can walk right in and get any tattoo you want, or make an appointment and have something custom done. So this is kind of our introduction to everyone and why we're doing what we're doing. We both have been in the business for, I don't know, probably about 30 years at this point. I think, Jack, you've been in for 30 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 30. Yeah, 31.
I am pretty much self-taught. Jack went through a real formal apprenticeship from a person that had been tattooing for a long time. So we have a little bit of a bit different background, but we kind of share a lot of the same values and kind of have the same outlook on a lot of things. We've seen a lot of changes in the tattoo industry, and not all of them are great, but that's life, I guess. So Jack, why don't we talk about where you came from and how you got to where you are?
Well, as you said, I did an apprenticeship. I apprenticed under a guy that had been tattooing for 25 years. And he was very, very old school. He had isolated himself from other tattooers. A lot of us, we associate with other people that tattoo, and we share knowledge, and he didn't do that. Any other tattooer was a threat to him, and that's a very old school mentality. You hear a lot about the guys that were tattooing in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even up into the 80s, that were one person in a shop, and that's it. And they didn't associate with other tattooers. So the guy that taught me, his name was Dave, and I learned using acetate stencils, and we only did single needle outlines, except on very dark skinned people we would use a Type 3. He colored everything in with a 7 round, unless it was like a back piece, and then he'd use a 14 round. Ooh. And that's how I learned. You know what I mean? No mags, and Dave knew how to use flats, but flats were bad because you could cut somebody.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. I was with that guy for a year. I worked at his shop, and then when I went somewhere else, that was like another apprenticeship. Basically, it was a very eye-opening experience. I had to learn how to use a thermofax and make mags, and but it was awesome. I'm very thankful for the experience I got. My apprenticeship was very formal. We had a written agreement. I paid him $10,000 for my apprenticeship, and I knew, at what point I was going to learn to make needles, at what point I was going to start tattooing people. It was very well laid out, and for all of his faults, Dave definitely had a good apprenticeship program. And it's weird because he was really, really against it. I only know of one for sure other person, and there's another person, I think. So maybe he taught like 3 people in his career. I pestered the shit out of that dude. He was either going to teach me to tattoo or ban me from the shop.
And what year did you start your apprenticeship?
1992.
Okay.
I was in the Army. I got out of the Army and started learning to tattoo. I was getting tattooed by him when I was in the Army, and then I was just, hanging out. And I just made myself useful. I'd offer to do drawings for him. He wasn't really that great of an artist. He was an excellent tracer. and was really good at like combining different images from reference material to lay out a design. But like, if you wanted him to lay out a sleeve, he'd just be like, okay, cool, pick something off the wall, and then figure out the background later.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I really, really wanted it, and I really wanted him to teach me. His line work was perfect. Even with a 1, it was amazing. And I didn't know shit about tattooing, but I knew enough to recognize like a good, well done tattoo, you know. And you know, that was a big deal. The way he did his outline, it was perfect. So I made that dude teach me, basically.
It sounds like you really had a lot of technical skill as far as like the application of a tattoo and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I like to think that my line work is still pretty good. Learning that way will definitely make sure you have clean lines. It's hard to line with a 1.
Oh yeah.
Every once in a while, I will still like make a couple needles. I'll make a 1 and maybe do something with it just to humble myself a little.
See if you still got it.
Yeah. Anybody that I teach or that I see is learning, you know, I have multiple locations, I have multiple stores, I have a bunch of people that work for us. And so I'll ask the apprentices, be like, hey, do you want to learn to make needles? And they're always like, ooh, yeah. Because, you know, even though it's a skill they'll never use, I still teach people how to make needles because I think it helps you understand your equipment, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. People think they want to learn how to make needles until they have to make needles. And then they're like, oh man, what am I doing? This is a nightmare.
Yeah. 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 It's not fun. The headache from the flux and it's great stuff.
Burning your fingers.
Yeah. And sorry, for newer tattooers, needles weren't always the little cartridges. They were actually like on a bar and you know.
Well, and to be fair, sometimes you could buy just the needle heads and solder those to the bar. And like, that's when things really kind of sped up as far as like needle making time that you had to spend on that stuff, you know?
Oh yeah. That seems like not a big deal, but that was huge.
Yeah. Because
the most time consuming part is, especially with mags, is making the needle heads, weaving those mags.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple companies, I used to buy them from like either Technical or Dermographics. You could buy a pack of just the heads. And yeah, you're right. That really changed things. Why did we make needles? Because pre-made needles were stupid expensive.
Yeah.
I went out of town and was tattooing, and I had more clients than I had brought stuff for. And I was actually close to National. So I called them up and bought some pre-made needles. And dude, they were like, I can't remember. It was either 3 for $15 or 5 of them for 15. I can't remember. They were either $3 or $5 a piece.
Yeah.
And you know, we're talking like early 90s. That was definitely more money. $3 now, who cares, right? But then it was more, you know.
Yeah,
and it was crazy.
Gas was like less than $1 a gallon back then, probably, huh?
Yeah, probably. No, but yeah. So you made needles, and I don't know. That's where I came from, and it was cool. I didn't get like the abuse a lot of people talk about during apprenticeships. I mean, I definitely did some stuff that wasn't really part of tattooing. You know, I've never found the need to be able to polish the chrome on somebody's bike.
Yeah.
Since I left my apprenticeship, except for my own, but I did that. You know, lots of food runs, lots of like normal stuff. Nothing that was too crazy. I hear horror stories, especially from like some of the staff that work for me, where they came from, and it crazy. And we'll get into that in other episodes.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's so many different kinds of people in tattooing now that there's going to be all these different kinds of experiences. I think back when you started, and probably, when I first had gotten into the industry, the kind of people that were into tattooing were basically the same kind of people. They were, bikers and that kind of, outlaw subculture type thing. And, they functioned a certain way, and they had expectations. Like you said, your guy Dave had a plan laid out for you. Nowadays, it seems like that's almost unheard of. I mean, when you hear of somebody that has a structured apprenticeship program, you're just like, what, really? That's insane. But
or other tattooers like shit all over it, because having any kind of structured apprenticeship program, that's too close to being a school, and we can't have that.
Well, we have schools, so
yeah,
it's not.
And our resistance to that thing as tattooers, people being so against it, is the reason why we have schools owned by people from outside of tattooing.
Yeah,
we did that.
Yeah,
we fucked that all up.
We left a hole in the market, right? There's a demand for this service, and people don't know the difference. They just, it's a tattoo school, and now shit, some of them are accredited. They've been around long enough that the state just recognizes them, and they ain't teaching nobody shit, but they're there, and there's people lined up with thousands of bucks to pay these hucksters to get into the business, and they still got to go do a fucking apprenticeship when they're done with it.
Yeah. Accredited, that matters, because if you're an accredited school, that means your students can get financial aid. So these people are now taking out student loans and able to get into tattooing. Wow, how fucking crazy is that?
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
So anyway, so when and related to the needle making thing, I had national catalogs and Spalding and Rogers catalogs where you could see the needle making jigs and stuff. But at that time in my life, when I was kind of teaching myself how to tattoo, I was a welder, and I saw the material that they used to make like needle grouping jigs and things like that, and I knew what it was. One thing is a drill bit index for tiny drill bits, and that was what we would use to tighten the needles. And I went to the welding shop and got one of those things. I was like, oh, this is a thing right here. And then another thing that I think Spalding had was this little kind of tube that you would put the needles inside of. Yeah. And it would like hold them together so you could solder the end. And I kind of reverse engineered one of those. It was like the bars that are on the needle bars, those are 316 stainless steel welding rods. That's what they are. So I knew what that was, and I was making my own bars out of 316 stainless steel welding rods. And then I figured out how to reverse engineer that needle grouping thing, and I made one of those. So I kind of did it all kind of myself. But it was because, I was in the welding industry and I had access to that stuff, and I knew what it was when I saw it. So that kind of mentality for me helped me move forward into progressing through tattooing. I learned how to build machines by taking them apart and putting them back together. Nobody taught me that stuff. I just kind of had a knack for it. So that was,
I think tattooers back, our generation and before, there was a certain amount of mechanical aptitude that you had to have. You had to service your own equipment and be able to make needles, which requires being able to solder. And not that that's difficult or anything, but you couldn't just hop on Amazon real quick. There was no fucking internet, like you had to get a catalog mailed to you. Yeah. You might even have to prove that you're a fucking tattooer to get the catalog. With National, they wouldn't just send shit to anybody. You know what I mean? Other companies, Spalding didn't give a shit to, they'd mail that shit to prisons if they could, but you had to be able to do that. And that's really cool how you figured that out. There's definitely something to be said for that. That's pretty cool. Because I was going to ask, how did you figure out making needles? But
reverse engineered it, man.
Yeah.
But I've always kind of been like that. I was always just naturally curious about things and interested in how things functioned and stuff like that. So, I knew how a tattoo machine worked without even understanding like electricity and magnetism and things like that. I just knew this piece goes here. I don't know why, but it does. Because if you don't do it that way, the fucking thing won't work. So, I kind of learned that. Now I understand, electricity, magnetism a lot better. But back to your point, that you couldn't just order a tattoo machine from one of 50 guys that makes tattoo machines, right? I mean, there was 3 or 4 places you could get them, and it took weeks to get it and stuff like that. So if your machine broke, you had to fix it. There wasn't some guy you could mail it off to that would repair them. I mean, maybe there was, but I didn't have access to it. So we had to, know how to operate and work on those things when it broke.
Yeah. And now it's disposable. Your $1,000 rotary breaks and you throw it the fuck away. That's it. I'm sure some of them you can replace the motors in, but that's the expensive part. I'm still using the same machines I was using 30 years ago.
I definitely own the same machines that I had back then, but I got a little bit nicer stuff now.
Yeah. The liner that I got when I started has definitely been altered, but I still use it.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So you didn't have an apprenticeship. You figured out on your own how to make needles. And then,
well, let me say this though. I didn't have an apprenticeship, not because I didn't want one. It was because I lived in a town that didn't have tattoo shops. So I'm originally from Tallahassee, Florida, and in the 90s there was no tattoo shops there.
Was it illegal?
I guess so. I mean, I was a young guy and I didn't really understand the way shit like that works, so I didn't really look into it. I presume it was illegal. It must have been, because there would have been a tattoo shop. It's a college town and stuff like that. Tallahassee is sort of like the Bible Belt, right? Back then anyway, there was no strip clubs, tattoo shops, things like that. A lot of businesses were closed on Sunday, which was a nice place to grow up or whatever, but it was too small of a town for me. But anyway, we had to go drive to Panama City Beach to get tattooed. That was the closest shop to us. And we were going down there when, me and my friends were 16, 17 years old, probably, getting tattoos. And it was wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. Tattooing was illegal in the town that I learned in Killeen, Texas, which is right outside Fort Hood. It's a big military base. And they had outlawed tattooing, but the dude that taught me existed before they passed the law. So he was grandfathered in. If he ever closed that shop, that would have been it. There would have been no tattooing there. And then in the early 90s, when the state of Texas started regulating tattooing, that changed everything, because the state laws regarding tattooing kind of voided all the weird little municipalities that had outlawed tattooing. And tattooing had been outlawed by pressure from the military, because soldiers were going to these terrible places and, getting fucking infections. And, back then they thought getting tattooed meant you were getting hepatitis. So,
yeah. I've heard that the military has gone through cycles where they would allow tattooing and not allow tattooing. Like some new general or whatever gets in charge and he don't like tattoos and can't have tattoos anymore. And then the next guy comes and he's like, yeah, fuck that guy. We're going to allow tattoos again. Or maybe it's a matter of like, hey, we need to recruit people and we need to allow tattoo people to come in because we're low on numbers or whatever. So that's Panama City, where we used to go get tattooed, was next to I think Tyndall Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. And they were telling me, that's how it would be. Like the Air Force would allow tattoos or not allow tattoos or whatever.
Yeah. When I was in, it was just as long as you didn't get them like on your hands or your face, as long as they were covered in a dress uniform, you were fine. And I know, like after that, actually, when tattooing really started to become popular, the military kind of tightened it up to where you couldn't have anything visible when you were in your PT uniform. I knew a guy that had a bunch of stuff on his legs, and he had to get a waiver to go in. You know what I mean? He had to get a special whatever to be allowed to join, and I guess they've loosened that back up now. I know police departments around the country have loosened up their requirements too, because they want prior military. Well, all these guys are coming out of the military heavily tattooed, so it's a weird thing. It's in we all think younger tattooers and a lot of us don't think about what it was like to be heavily tattooed when you were probably going to be the only motherfucker in the room that was heavily tattooed.
Yeah.
And going to small towns and shit like that, like it was definitely different. I would get followed around. I got followed around a Harley-Davidson dealership in Oklahoma City in the 90s. One, tattooing was illegal in the state of Oklahoma, and I was heavily tattooed. And the one place where I figured I wouldn't get grief about it, they fucking thought I was going to steal something or do something. You know what I mean? Because I look like a fucking outlaw to them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's crazy because I went to the fair with my family this year, and there was groups of cops walking around, and every group of cops, there would be like 3 or 4 cops, at least 1 or 2 of them were heavily tattooed, like full sleeves.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I can't remember seeing that many cops with that much tattoo coverage. I mean, you always see a cop with a tattoo every once in a while, but I mean, these are people that are just covered with really nice tattoos too. I mean,
that's awesome.
I thought it was cool. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of cops, but I like tattoos.
Well,
so whatever.
Nobody really is.
There's people that like cops, man. Other cops.
Other cops.
Yeah, I think we come from a time where being heavily tattooed was not common, and it was more for people on the fringes of society, bikers, punk rockers, people that didn't want to fit in, and it was a different, we got treated differently, like you said. It's not like now where it's on TV, every commercial has tattooed people, and you see billboards with tattooed people, which I think is great, but it's just not, I think people don't understand that it used to be a lot different.
Yeah. Tattooing has always been such a unique and very, very special thing. I mean, it's crazy. I fucking love it. You know what I mean? I love everything about it. Even the stuff that I hate. It's fucking awesome. It's because it's something completely unique to this thing of ours. You know what I mean? Like, tattooing is very special. And I mean, the new generation of tattooers are trying as hard as they can to fuck that up. But
come on now. I mean, there's definitely some disconnect from the newer people to the place where we came from. But I don't think it's a deliberate.
No,
I think it's just a natural evolution of things. Things change. There are some, unsavory characters in tattooing, and I wish we could get rid of them, but it's always been.
It's not even like that. It's become more mainstream because that's what we always wanted, right? We always wanted more people to come and get tattooed. As tattoo artists, that's what you want. You want a bigger clientele. You want more people to come in. You want to not get harassed when you go to the grocery store. Before I had my hands and my neck tattooed, I had sleeves. Yeah. And the difference in how I was treated if I wore a long sleeve shirt was incredible. It was crazy. And I'm certainly not complaining about that. I did this to myself, and I got tattooed because I'm fucking antisocial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's cool, but it's not that way now. I mean, to a certain extent. What was crazy is back then, heavily tattooed men were not that common. But to see a woman that was heavily tattooed, that was fucking nuts. And I had a friend, she was very heavily tattooed, and I told her one time, I was like, man, I love walking down the street with you. I was like, because I am fucking invisible. Nobody even notices me, says anything, because I'm with this cute girl that's got fucking sleeves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The harassment that poor thing got, you know, especially
Sure.
by other women, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's a lot different. It's a lot easier to be a tattooer now, for sure. You know what I mean? Like, as you mentioned, there's a gazillion supply companies, and dude, a lot of them are making incredibly like quality products. You know,
Yeah.
there is so much innovation in tattooing right now because there's money. You know,
Well, there's also a lot of people in it. So
right.
the more brains that are involved in it, the more different directions it's going to get pushed and pulled, and different things are going to get tried out. And I think when that happens, that's part of what brings money into the business, you know, because there's new shit that we can do and new ways to do it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look at something as like as common as like disposable tubes, and I mean, that wasn't even a thing when I started.
Oh
I
no.
mean,
Yeah.
what? Not till 2000s disposable.
Yeah. I think I remember disposable probably early 2000s is when it
Yeah,
really started to be common.
but now there's, you know, so many, and cartridges and all of that. But like, you know, there's doesn't Workhorse have like a biodegradable or recyclable disposable tubes? Like the grips are made of cork and um, all environmentally conscious kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen that. That's cool though.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of the things that we were using in tattooing, like ink caps, were not made for tattooing.
No.
That's like to protect fittings for hydraulic lines
Yep,
and things
yep.
like that. And now they're being specifically manufactured for us.
Yeah.
Thermofaxes and thermofax paper were not manufactured for tattooing. That's a photocopier was really expensive, and that was a method of copying documents for schools and
Yeah.
government agencies and stuff like that. Probably a lot of other businesses, but
Yeah, we called them ditto machines when I was a
yes.
kid, and they would
Mhm.
produce like that purple ink paper, and it was a little bit wet and smelled funny when you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you'd know that the teacher had just ran a bunch of them off because they were still warm.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but
Yeah, a lot of things in tattooing were appropriated from other things because the industry was so small and kind of boutique or I don't know what the word is, bespoke.
DIY.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you know, people would use a barber chair, a dentist chair. They didn't make tattoo chairs until, you know, in the past 10 or 15
Yeah.
years, probably, you
Sure.
know. But yeah, everything came from something else for
Yeah.
tattooing.
We had a weightlifting bench. That's how you got your
Huh?
chest
Yeah.
tattooed, you know? Yeah. And then I remember somebody bought a massage table and we were like, whoa.
I remember before armrests were made, people would buy those like pipe stands to when you're cutting pipe, you would have
Yeah.
this like platform basically with a base that you could adjust, and made a like an armrest out of that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, armrests are relatively easy to make, so that became a thing. And there was a lot of people in that period of tattooing who were bringing a lot of new ideas in. So the appropriating the pipe stand didn't last very long.
Yeah. I made a little wooden box that I put my foot on, and then
yeah.
I would rest the customer's arm on my knee. I had
Yeah,
a laptop, and until I met a guy whose old lady was a welder, and I was like, "Hey, could she make me something like this?" Because National sold them; they were just expensive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had somebody make one for me.
I still tattoo like that. I just grab a hold of people, and
Yeah,
I don't like that stand, gets in my way.
yeah, I've gotten pretty used to it. It keeps me from punching over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we also came from the era of walk-in tattooing. I mean, we came from people would line up at the shop sometimes before you open and walk in when we opened up, look around the walls and pick something out and just put it on their arm. Like that was the first probably 5 years of my professional tattoo career was doing stuff like that. Occasionally somebody would say, "Hey, I want to get, this particular thing, this image or whatever." And the guy that owned the shop where I was working at, he would do a lot more specialized stuff like portraits and a little bit bigger Japanese style tattooing. He had been around longer and understood more about that than we did. So we were just doing shit off the wall. And that was kind of, how we learned to tattoo, is by doing JD Crow Flash and Cherry Creek Flash and Picture Machine Flash and all the stuff that every tattoo shop had in the 90s.
Yeah,
that was a different world.
Flash was really important. The shop I learned at, all the Flash was there was some old Spalding Flash, and then there was tons and tons of hand-drawn Flash that Dave had done.
Nice.
And people would bring in tattoo magazines and be like, "I want this one."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was the beginning of the Pinterest tattoos. You know what I mean? Tattoo magazines. So anytime somebody asked Dave for something and he had to draw it, he would put that aside. And then when he had enough drawings to make a sheet of Flash, they all went on that sheet and that went up on the wall.
Nice.
And that's what he taught me. You'd comb through tattoo magazines looking for reference and then draw that and create Flash. You had to be constantly producing Flash because people were going around to shops and getting stuff off the wall, and you had to have new stuff for people to get. And then when I left there and went to where I was working next, they had all the old stuff, but they also had all the JD Crow stuff, which was new. And I remember when Cherry Creek came out.
Yeah, me too.
That stuff, like, you had to have it. If you didn't have it, your customers were going to go down the street to the guy that did have it.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal. We didn't call them walk-in tattoos. They were just tattoos.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying that for the benefit of people that don't know.
One thing I've noticed is I think without knowing it now, a lot of people are like, they like to stick things in little boxes and kind of limit themselves. Oh, I don't do walk-ins. It's like, why? That guy wants a tattoo. You're not doing nothing. Do the walk-in, But yeah, it's an appointment tattoo. It's a walk-in tattoo. I saw some guy online saying this same thing, and I was like, yeah, that dude's totally right. The shop I learned at wouldn't make appointments.
First come, first serve.
Yes, and I think it's just he didn't want to be bothered. He didn't want to try and manage an appointment book or guesstimate how long. Because what if you think it's going to take 2 hours and only takes an hour? Well, you're sitting around for an hour and that's money you're wasting.
Yeah.
Because if you tattoo by a military base and it's payday weekend, you got to get that money. And if that means staying at the shop till 4 a.m., you got to do it. The GIs would line up outside the shop on payday weekend a couple of hours before we opened.
Yeah.
And if you walked in and 20 minutes after we opened, you'd have like a fucking 8-hour wait. And they would do it. We had a pool table, we had a TV, and we had a soda machine.
Yeah.
And then there was fast food places they would drive to. And yeah, man, that they just hung out, all day. It was an all day thing. You'd hang out at the shop, or the smart ones would put some money aside and then wait till the middle of the month or whatever to go get tattooed. But yeah, payday weekends were crazy. And I bet it's still like that,
Oh, I'm sure.
Anybody that's ever done a Friday the 13th thing at their shop, that's what payday weekend was like.
Yeah, but the guys were getting bigger tattoos.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Well, I heard recently somebody talking about some guy that has some deal with the government, and he's putting tattoo shops inside military bases. So it is definitely still a thing.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. I mean, why not? You know what I mean?
I would do it.
The government is never going to stop soldiers from getting tattooed. So control it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the details about it. I just heard about it. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. I think maybe I heard something about that too. I
interesting.
Probably didn't believe it. So,
I mean, I've heard it more than once at this point. So I kind of think it's real. I don't want to believe it because it's not me doing it. I wish I did it, but whatever.
Do you remember there was a thing going around the internet that Walmart was putting tattoo shops in, like where they have nail salons?
Yeah, I remember that.
That was fake. And it was started by a feller we know.
Oh yeah. Walmart does have on their online store tattoo supplies, but their online store is the same as Amazon.com. I mean, anybody can put products on there and sell it. And I've seen a lot of people be upset by Walmart selling tattoo gear. And I'm like, it's their fucking website. You can put stuff on there for sale.
Yeah.
There's not tattoo gear for sale in Walmart. But I do think that they sell some tattoo specific aftercare inside Walmart. Yeah. So I mean, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I've seen tattoo gear at Walmart. It was a while ago. I don't remember where I was. Not here in Florida, but somewhere.
I mean, at this point, there's no stopping vendors from selling products if they want to sell them. You know, the days of only tattooers being able to buy tattoo products are long gone. You know, so you can't fight that.
I received a sample in the mail, and I cannot remember which company it was from, but it was either A&D or Lubriderm, and it was an aftercare product specifically for tattoos. And they sent us a sample, not wanting us to carry it, because I looked to see if we could buy it wholesale, but wanting us to recommend it to our customers, which tattooers are doing now. They're always like, oh yeah, put some Lubriderm on it. Yeah.
Well, I've heard that. This is the most common aftercare thing that I've heard. We should probably do a whole episode on aftercare, to be honest with you. One of the most common things I've heard is wash it with dial soap.
Yes.
Put Lubriderm on it. And I asked the people, why do you tell people that? Oh, they say antibacterial dial soap. Okay.
Right.
So I say, why?
Yeah.
Why do you tell people that? I know the answer. I want to see if they do. And inevitably they think about, well, that's what I was told to tell them. So somebody somewhere decided that was what is the correct way to do it. And everybody's just kind of run with it since then. And I said, well, do you know what antibacterial means? And then they think about it and usually say, well, it kills bacteria. And I say, yeah. And technically all soap is antibacterial because, you know, you're rubbing soap in your hands and the mechanical action of moving is killing bacteria. And then the soap is an emulsifier and all this other stuff, you know, the whole process of how it works. And I go, why don't you tell them to use the stuff that we sell? Because it's made for, you know, our industry by people that support us. But, you know, that's what they were always told. So I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, we should do an aftercare episode. My favorite is I heard a tattooer go, okay, use Aquaphor, put a little bit of Aquaphor on it, wash it with dial. Don't use any petroleum products. It's like, well, what the fuck do you think Aquaphor is? It's runny Vaseline.
Yeah. Runny Vaseline.
So, you had mentioned that we did walk-in tattoos when we came up and stuff like that, and that was kind of the industry standard. There was a lot of people that took appointments, and also the industry standard. And I was thinking about this. I really hadn't given it much thought, but most tattoo shops were one guy.
Yeah.
You know, there were definitely exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, it was one guy, you know, and if you saw a shop where it was a few people, that was different, you know. My father-in-law was a tattooer through the 70s and 80s, and he figured out that if he hired somebody, he could still go to the bar and be making money at the same time. So that's what he did. He had this lady named Vita that tattooed for him. I wish I could find information about her. But yeah, he hired somebody, and that was unusual. There was actually, that was in Denver. There was another shop, a guy named Peter Pilos, Peter Tattoo, and he had multiple locations across the country, and they were usually staffed by several people. And he was big one on teaching women to tattoo. So he had a lot of females working for him. There's actually a woman in Denver still tattooing named Kim that learned under Peter and worked at his shop there.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But for the most part, it was just one dude.
Yeah. Well, when we first opened Atomic in 2001, we came from the, walk-in model, street shop model, and we wanted to have that same kind of experience, but try to improve on it. We made the shop big and open and bright, and had a lot of what we thought was cool flash at the time. It wasn't the Cherry Creek and JD Crow stuff. It was like artist flash. Like, we had flash from different artists that we liked, and that was it was still really before the internet was a big thing. So, it was, I guess, the natural progression of that era. And since then, we've kind of maintained the same street shop walk-in that you can get a custom tattoo model. And a lot of other tattoo shops, especially in Tampa, and I don't know exactly how, what everything is like in Orlando, but everything seems to be changing to a lot more of a appointment only kind of you come in and get your tattoo, and the guy does one tattoo a day or something like that. There may be one or two other people working there, or even just one person, and their hours are like noon to 6 or noon to 7. They're not what I always thought were normal tattoo shop hours, like noon to 9 or 10 at night. People get off work and they go get a tattoo. Some people work, night shifts, so they'll come in earlier or whatever. But it seems like things are changing in the way that tattoo shops operate now. Is that something you've seen in Orlando?
Yeah, and a lot of trends in tattooing are I feel are customer driven. Like I have flash on the walls, and it's fucking decoration. Every once in a while we'll do something off of it. My favorite is when somebody shows me a Pinterest tattoo, and I go, "Oh yeah, we have that right here," and walk over and point at the JD Crow rose, and they go, "Oh, that's customer driven stuff." But the weird hours and the appointment only, that's artist driven. That's what how the artists want it to be. And if that model works for you, that's totally cool. Unfortunately, most customers want what they want when they want it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to make an appointment. They don't want to wait. They want to get it now. And if you can't do it right now, they just go somewhere else and get it now. And that's cool too. I used to get tattooed that way, and now I'm a little more, I don't have a lot of room left. So, I'm planning things out more than I used to. But man, it was fun to be like, hey, fuck it, let's go get a tattoo, And that was cool. That was a really cool experience. But I understand both models, but customers are always going to want to do walk-ins, and there should be people there to fill that void. Another thing is there's all these salon loft places now, and I don't know if that's a big thing over there yet, but there's tons of tattooers that have gone and opened a private studio, and they're in one of those places, and they're doing their own thing. I don't know anyone that has been successful at it and able to make a living, but I'm sure there are people out there. I don't know, like 3 or 4 people that have done it. One just opened. Another one, it's like she's got another job to support herself, and I don't know. I mean, it takes the right person to be able to pull that off. You've got to be motivated. You've got to be, to build a clientele and to go to work and actually do the tattoos. You know what I mean? And if you're in something like that, you're not getting walk-in traffic. So you
No.
better be able to promote yourself well. And for some it works, you know what I mean? But the third year tattooer that thinks they're hot shit, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Well, I think that also used to be a little easier to do before they changed all the algorithms on social media.
Yeah.
The algorithms now are almost impossible to understand. You can just see when you're scrolling, and then you see something and you try to go back to it, it's gone. Like the feed refreshes when you're it's trying to suck you in, you know. And I get it, but I don't understand how it works. And like, how do you use that now to promote yourself and advertise? It used to be you could see somebody had a certain number of followers, and their interactions would be about 10% of that, and that would be, you know, that's the way it works. I don't think it's like that anymore. I think you can have 10,000 followers and your interactions might be, you know, 1 or 2%, maybe 5 if you're lucky, but it's not 10% anymore like it used to be. It's strange. And I think that is going to make it more difficult for people that are like these little owner operators that are trying to do a private studio to really promote themselves and really gain new customers outside of, you know, whatever word of mouth they're getting from their existing customers.
Yeah. Just how social media has changed our industry is a whole episode on its own. I mean, that is the impact of social media is insane. It's definitely made us a lot more accessible.
I think social media primarily has taken away the mystery of tattooing.
Yeah, it's and like, if you wanted to talk to me about a tattoo, you had to come to the shop.
Yeah.
Now you can email me, you can, you know, message me through multiple fucking different social media things. And, you know, I even have a Google Voice number. That's an app that they can text me, you know.
Your
I have it
Google
set up
Assistant.
where if they call it, it goes to the shop, but they can text me, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're definitely more accessible, and that's quite frankly better for the customer, I guess. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, yeah. We want it to be as convenient as possible for clients to get information about tattooing, at least, you know, from our business. There's nothing better than the face-to-face meeting with a customer, because, you know, you're selling yourself when you're selling your tattoo services. You are the product.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a lot harder for me to convince somebody I'm the right person to get a tattoo over the phone or text or whatever than it is in person.
Right. And it's very difficult to read somebody's tone.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you looked at an email and thought, the guy's kind of a dick, you know? And then, but it's not meant like that. It's just, you know, that's how you're perceiving it. That's you, you know, not the other person. And yeah, it's always better to chat with somebody about a design. It drives me nuts how many people are like, how much for this? And I understand the customers have no experience. They don't know.
Right.
They don't know that I can't just tell them a price. You know what I mean? All of our artists set their own prices to a certain extent. You know what I mean? We have a set minimum. We have a set hourly rate, but the artist still determines the price. And I don't want to quote something that somebody else is going to think is too low or too high. So I'm always like, hey, please come talk to an artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, can you guess? Well, sure. I guess you're going to have to come talk to an artist. I don't know. Like, I'm sorry. I can't, you know. And I think that's off-putting to the customer. I'm sure there's a better way to handle it. I just ain't figured it out yet. You know, a lot of times I will give them a really wide range, be like more than 100, less than 200 or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I get it. Like, we are both tattooing in tourist destinations.
Yeah.
And you have people coming from out of state or out of the country that are trying to budget their trip.
Yeah.
And they need to know how much to put aside for that tattoo. And really the reason is I don't want you to come in so I can talk you into getting the tattoo. I mean, you reached out to me. You're definitely interested. but there's a lot of variables with getting tattooed and placement and size. And I mean, I'm sure you've had this too. Somebody tells you they want it 3 inches and they don't. They want it fucking 12, you know?
Yeah, they don't know what 3 inches is.
Right. You know, well, she can thank her husband for that. But you know, or like, I want it the size of my hand. Well, I don't. How big's your hand, dude? Mini me, Andre the Giant, which one?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I
actually
always
had a
ask.
customer send me a picture of their hand. There's no reference for how big the hand was. It was this
That's
big.
awesome. I asked people before, so you want about the size of your hand? And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, how big is your hand compared to mine? And they were like, well, I can't see your hand. And I said, and I can't see yours either. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
I try to make them laugh about it, you know, like, oh, you understand now. Like,
yeah,
you need to be in person to do this.
yeah, for sure. And you know, part of what drives the price is the artist's desire to do the tattoo.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
And that sounds kind of shitty, but like, some people really hate doing certain things. You know, I know guys that they just don't want to fuck with American traditional. They're
Right.
just like, I don't like it. It's too simple, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so they're not going to, and I love doing it. So maybe I'm going to give you a better price than that
Right.
guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? It ain't going to be different by much, $20, something, depending, but you know, it's always best to come in. You're probably going to get a better price if you go in and talk to somebody than you force them to quote you online. Or they're just going to fucking throw out a number online that isn't going to matter when you actually show up to the shop. So I think an important question that should be asked here is, why do you think we should do this podcast? What's the goal?
Well, based on a lot of the other podcasts about our industry and tattooing and stuff, it's a lot of awesome tales of stories of crazy shit that's happened, of interesting, you know, people and you know, things that have happened. And I haven't heard a lot of stuff about the business aspect of it, like running a shop and, you know, dealing with customers and things like that. A lot of the stuff now is also about like tattoos themselves, right? Like, this is how this tattoo was done, and look at how this was composed and all that. People breaking down tattoos or critiquing them or whatever. I feel like, you know, we have a lot of experience running shops and working with a lot of different tattoo artists, and you know, we were always discussing all these crazy things, you know, that we're dealing with and going through. And you know, I think it's a good way for us to kind of give a little back to tattooing, to share some of our knowledge and experience with people, so that, you know, they can maybe learn from, you know, mistakes that we've made, or you know, things that we've kind of unlocked and figured out. So that's, you know, I feel like it's sort of a way to give back, you know, because, you know, I love tattooing, and I want to see it prosper and thrive and improve. And I hope, you know, I can be a part of making it better.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I want to see tattooing continue and thrive, and everything you said. And if I can pass on anything that I've learned to help other tattooers, then I think it's great, because tattooers aren't businessmen, most of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have learned along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often said that instead of going to college for art, I should have gone for business. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I already knew the fucking art part.
Yeah.
You know, so that's been a journey for us. And what works for us might not be applicable for other people.
Right.
We do work with a lot of tattooers. I mean, what do you have in Tampa Bay? You have 100 tattooers that work for you?
I think there's about 70 across
Okay.
the 11 stores that we have here.
Yeah.
We have 100 employees, so there's
Yeah.
piercers, tattooers, and counter people across all the locations.
So company wide, we're over 100.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
probably got, I don't know, 30 tattooers, counting myself and a few piercers and counter people and whatnot. And I feel that working with other tattooers definitely helps you grow as an artist, even if it's learning what not to do, you know,
For sure.
watching something being like, whoa, I won't handle it like that. You know, I mean, everything's a learning experience if you're paying attention. So
Yeah.
I feel like that's something, you know, that we have to offer that a lot of other people don't.
Yeah.
And there are other companies now with multiple locations. That's not as rare as it used to be, but we didn't have a model to follow. We kind of figured that stuff out, you know.
Yeah.
I see a lot of misinformation on the internet. It seems like there's a lot of people that love to make little videos on TikTok or whatever, you know, trying to pass on some wisdom to the young tattooer, and they're fucking wrong. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff out there, and a lot of it makes me think, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I hadn't looked at it like that before. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But man, like, there was this dude going on about how if you're a couple years in and you're still taking walk-ins, you're fucking up. And not the first time I've been called to fuck up, I guess, but dude, like that business model isn't applicable to everybody, especially like look at the guys that are tattooing on Miami Beach. That's tons of tourists, and they're not all going to make fucking appointments. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, tell Tattoos by Lou that they're fucking up because they take walk-ins, you know? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know why I think I'm more credible than that guy, but I don't know. Maybe all the listeners will be into it, you know, and at least give them a different perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we don't know everything, and we don't understand every different type of business model in the tattoo industry, but we know ours. We know how to do what we do. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, we've worked together for years, and I mean, we talk constantly about, you know, how to deal with this issue or that issue, and like we know how to solve these problems. I mean, we're doing it in real time.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Customer complaints and, you know, and conflicts between staff and customers, or just, you know, hurdles that we have to deal with. You know, I feel like every time we get a new inspector for the health department, you got to break them in, you know what I mean? And there's a gentle way to do that doesn't offend them. And, you know, I don't know, things like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I was thinking that my uncle lives in a very small town in Minnesota and gets tattooed by this guy that's on his third failing shop now. And he'll open a shop and won't take walk-ins. And this is a small town, and he's not the only game in town, but he is probably the best in town. And then won't take walk-ins. It's appointment only. And then that shop fails. And it's not because of his business model. It's because of the location. So he'll do the exact same thing in a different spot. And that fails. And I think he's like tattooing out of his garage now or some shit. I don't know. But it's like, hey, man, you need to take a step back and look at what you're doing. You know what I mean? And I think there's people in the industry that are unable to do that.
Yeah, well, there's people that are unable to do that, you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's not specific to us.
Right. Yeah, I was talking to somebody recently, and they said, well, what do you think the biggest problem, like, you know, you travel quite a bit, what do you think the biggest problem with Americans, like what you've seen traveling abroad? And I said, well, Americans generally have no self-awareness. They don't know that they're doing something wrong, or they don't know that they don't know something. You know, I've witnessed things, and you know, I think that's a problem in our industry too. A lot of people lack the self-awareness. Like, what is the problem here? Like, look at yourself. Take a look at what you're doing, the way you're thinking about it, the way you're processing things, you know, that start there. Because if you can fix that, you can do anything.
Sure. I tell people, I travel a lot too. And I tell people, put your phone down, turn your TV off, and go outside.
Yeah.
That's all, everything. Introduce yourself to your neighbor.
Yeah.
And, have a conversation. America is nothing like what you see on TV.
Not at all. No way.
The people aren't like that. Like, I mean, it's crazy. And tattooing is nothing like you see on TV either,
Yeah.
Talk to other tattooers. Social media is everybody's playing a role.
Yeah.
They're acting
They're putting on a show.
Yes, they want to be perceived a specific way, and it's usually like the very best life possible.
Yep.
And I have young artists ask me, be like, man, how come this guy is doing just traditional stuff? I want to do just traditional stuff. I'm like, well, he's only posting traditional stuff. We don't know what all is going on. You just see this little tiny lens, Yeah. But it doesn't hurt you to hear somebody else's perspective, for sure. I love hearing other tattooers' stories and how they came up and their struggles and their experiences and their successes,
Yeah.
I hear people be like, oh, I hope that fucking guy down the street goes out of business. Well, I don't. I want all small businesses to succeed,
Yeah.
I love the guy down the street. He's a fucking scumbag. And he's doing $30 tattoos, and that's cool because I don't want to deal with the people that want $30 tattoos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The guy down the street might be helping you more than you think.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So it's tattooing is crazy, and somebody's got to share like some of the stuff. And there's a lot of like that. No lies, just bullshit. That podcast is great.
Yeah.
And that's cool old stories and everything like that. But yeah. This is a business, whether you like it or not. And I know none of you out there tattoo for money. It's all for the art. But I don't tattoo for the money. Oh, so you're a fucking amateur. Because professionals tattoo for money. That's the definition of a professional. Somebody that does whatever it is for a fucking for pay. You can love the art and get paid.
Yeah. A friend of mine pointed out to me, he goes, yeah, there's people that, tattoo. Maybe they got another job like the person you mentioned earlier. And I started out like that. I worked as a welder and then tattooed at night. And then eventually made more money tattoo. And then I did in my factory job. So I was just like, I'm going to quit. But I really wasn't a professional tattooer until I made my living. Not just got paid, but made my living. Like that's how I supported my family was through tattooing. That's when I really became a professional tattooer in my mind. I've been tattooing for a long time, but I've been a professional tattooer since the day I quit my other job. Right. So that's kind of how I look at it. Like, and tattooing's been really good to me. And I want to give back. I want to share some of the wealth and knowledge and experience that I have, and I hope this is a way to do it.
Yeah, with all of the things that have been made easier in tattooing, availability of supplies, and you don't have to make needles, and being more socially acceptable. I mean, there was a time where it was hard to find a landlord that would lease a spot to you to open a tattoo shop, and in some places it's still like that. I feel like making a living as a tattooer was easier in the 90s and early 2000s. Now there's quite a bit of promotion that needs to be done. And I mean, we've always promoted and stuff like that, but the customer is more savvy.
Yeah.
And
well, they have more options too, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more options for sure. And I'm not saying that more shops mean you'll make less money. It just means you got to try harder, because you can still make it, I know tattooers, walk-in tattooers that are making six figures.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. The guys that make the most money in our company are doing almost all walk-ins.
Right. Yep.
And that's the model that we have. I mean, there's plenty of guys that work for us that are doing custom stuff and they're making plenty of money too. But the guys that make the most are the guys that come in early, don't turn tattoos down. They stay late. I mean, they are grinding it out,
Yeah. And a huge part of that is being able to draw something on the spot. I see people go, oh, I'm going to have to draw this. So you need to make an appointment. It's like, dude, I could draw that in 10 minutes.
Yeah, draw it now.
Like,
right in front of the customer.
Yeah. The guy is handing you a picture of what they want.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not telling you to trace it, but you can look at that and draw it, and it ain't going to take long.
Yeah.
You know, you lazy fuck, draw it, you know?
Well, I don't even think it's a matter of laziness. A lot of times it's like pressure, right? So this person's standing right here. They want this image created for them. And like you're trying to process how that's going to happen, what you're going to do. I usually will like start sketching right in front of the person if I can. Like this is how you want it, right? And just start drawing. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, that's exactly what I want, because they saw you make it for them right there.
Yes.
And then they get stoked on it. Yeah. You were creating it from thin air like magic.
Yes. Being able to draw something on a piece of paper is a pretty specialized skill, and not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
So that definitely is a huge confidence booster for your client too. They've seen you draw it. Now they know. You know what I mean? When you don't just bust out a drawing, they don't get to look behind the curtain, you know?
Yeah.
I noticed that we were working together. You came out here and worked, and somebody wanted something that pretty much anybody in the shop would have been like, oh, I'm going to have to spend some time drawing that. And you were like, well, I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so I'm going to do it right now. And you know what I mean? That guy was getting tattooed in 30 minutes. Yeah.
I mean, drawing on the skin is also like that. You know, if you can draw something on their skin, that they see exactly what the tattoo is going to look like. If they can imagine that, because some people don't have that ability. They can't picture what it's going to be. They see these red and green lines on their arm. They're like, what the fuck is that? I'm like, that's the tattoo, man. But some people look at it, they're like, fuck yeah, it's going to be badass. So, you know, that's another thing. Drawing on the skin it's another magic thing.
So that's how I was taught to do cover-ups. You always have to draw it on. I don't draw them all on now, but I'll draw some of them. Depends on what the subject matter is and stuff like that. Sometimes it's quicker for me to do it on paper and make a stencil than it is to keep trying to refine a drawing on your skin. You know, it depends. But yeah, that's part of how you become successful. And by successful, I mean making a good living and enjoying what you're doing, you know? And pressure, that I hadn't thought about that until you just said it, that some of them can't handle the pressure of having to produce art right then. I mean,
it might be imaginary, right? I mean, they might, what's the difference of drawing it right now or 20 minutes from now when the customer's not standing there? Who cares? Do it.
Yeah. I mean, we have a drawing table in the back where you can tell the customer to wait in the lobby, you know, they don't have to stand and watch you. I just got used to that because of the layout of shops that I've worked in before, you know. I don't care. So the first time I tattooed my wife is the daughter of a tattoo artist, and I've known her dad my whole life, right? So the first time I tattooed her, she sat right there and watched me draw the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, no pressure here, you know. I fucked this up. Her old man's coming for me, you know what I mean? Like, but it worked out.
Yeah, that's the hardest when you're tattooing a family member. My mom's asking me for tattoos now too, and I mean, like, I tattooed my mom a couple of times. Now I'm just like, I get one of the other guys to do it.
Well, I wouldn't do that either. I don't know. Whatever. That's another story.
I would have my son-in-law tattoo my mother. That's
you
know, keeping it in the family.
Yeah. I've tattooed my dad a bunch. That doesn't mind me. My other family members, my son, my uncles, you know. But
that's great. Yeah, tattooing brings families together. Creates new families too, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Tattooers and stuff definitely are my family. The guy that taught me was so hateful to other tattooers, and I always thought that, like, those were the people I wanted to hang out with, right? Because they're fucking cool and they have an awesome job, and so that's what I did. You know what I mean? I met other tattooers. That's somebody that you have some very unique experiences in common with. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, nobody else is, you know, probably had to do some of the things we've done, you know.
That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
very early in my career, I had to tattoo a old lady's vagina.
oh man, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
she hit on me the whole time. I was like 23.
That's never a comfortable situation, right?
No, no. But you know, so we tattooers have a lot to share with each other, and tattooing's always been a very secretive and very tight-lipped thing, and to a certain extent it still is, and sometimes it's not. Now
Yeah.
it's cool. You got to hashtag your pictures with everything you're using because you want other artists to know that, look, I use the cool machine too, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it used to be we would tell newer tattooers that, you know, weren't on our level, we would give them misinformation just to kind of fuck with them a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't do that now, but that definitely was a thing, you know, in the 90s.
Oh yeah. If I bought ink, I took the labels off.
Yeah.
You know, most of my career and still now I make my own pigment, but yeah, if I bought something, like I'm not making black. There's too many companies that make black that's amazing, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I would take the fucking label off the bottle. In Florida now, you can't do that. You've got to have it's got to be labeled. But yeah, that's how secretive we were. You know?
Yeah. Or you put the wrong stuff out so people could see that. That's what I use. Nope.
I remember when Dynamic Ink came out, people were really hating on that company because their phone number was printed real big on the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, oh my God, customers will be able to fucking call and order this shit. They're not going to sell to the customers, but like,
so what if they did?
That was a threat. Yeah.
Yeah. I like
the guy that taught me to be a dickhead would save his empty bottles. He used Spalding pigments and he'd save the empty bottles. And then he would fill them with alcohol and shake them up real good. And then he would sell that to customers. Be like, oh, you want to buy some ink? Sure. So there's like almost no pigment in it, just enough to turn the alcohol the color it's supposed to be. And that's what he would say. So
we used to tell people that would come in and ask where we bought our pigment that we would get it at Sears. And we would tell them like, hey, look, the guy's going to deny it, right? Because they don't want people buying it there. It's kind of a secret. So he's going to say he doesn't have it. So you need to be really insistent. Go to the paint department and be really insistent and tell them, I want the tattoo pigment. You got it in the back. I know you do. And then they'll give it to you.
Yeah. We used to tell people that.
Sears called us up
almost line by line, except we tell them to go in the back by where they do layaway and talk to those people because they hit it in the back.
Yeah, we got a phone call from Sears. They were pissed. Quit sending people. We don't have any tattoo pigment, man.
Yep. I recently saw a post, somebody that was kind of old school. Like I can't think of what the fucking it was about, but they said, you know, to go to Hobby Lobby because they got it. But you got to talk to the manager, and he's not going to know you're really a tattooer if you're not persistent enough.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm surprised you can't buy tattoo stuff at fucking Hobby Lobby now. You know what I mean? Sears, for a while, their website was like Amazon, where other sellers could sell, and you could buy equipment there, power supplies and stuff.
Nice.
You know, so
the internet is the greatest thing and the worst thing simultaneously.
Yes, it is. And I'm sure that it's not just us. I bet every industry has been touched by social media one way or the other. So the pandemic spawned tons of fucking home tattooers. They bought the stuff on Amazon. They bought some, you know, a $30 rotary, some cheap ass pigment, some practice skin.
Yeah. And
I got tons of them coming in. Be like, well, you need an apprenticeship. No, I know how to tattoo. Look, I did this. I'm like, that's cool. You know, you still need an apprenticeship. You're not where you need to be, you know?
Yeah.
And that was weird. I'd never come in and people insist that they were ready without ever tattooing a person. You know.
Well, that's our fault though, as tattooers, that we didn't create generally accepted process for learning how to tattoo. I mean, everyone agrees that apprenticeship is a way to go. Nobody agrees on how the apprenticeship should go. There's no, structured, agreed upon method of teaching somebody how to tattoo. So that's our fault. I mean, we're gonna keep getting shit like this because we never took the time to collectively say, this is how you learn how to tattoo, period. And until we do that, this is going to continue.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, where it's our fault that there's people from outside the industry that own tattoo schools.
Yeah.
Somebody from outside the industry is going to tell us how we have to teach people. I mean, that's already a thing in some states. In Oregon, you have to go to a tattoo school. My friend that tattoos there calls them state-sponsored scratchers.
Yeah.
And there are already in place federal and state guidelines for what an apprenticeship is. And I'm sure that no one is abiding by those. But as our popularity increases as an industry, the government is definitely looking at it. And man, the government loves to regulate shit. So
that's the whole reason they exist.
That's coming, so we can be part of that or not. Just like these new regulations where they're talking about everything we use is now going to be under FDA guidelines.
Products, yeah.
So that's a big deal, You should care.
It is. We have to get involved, right? You have to take control of the situation. You either drive these forces or you get overrun by them. We got to pick.
And it's been my experience on the state level with regulations in the tattoo industry. I've dealt with this in 2 states now, where the state regulators actually welcomed the input of the tattoo community, because they weren't trying to hurt us or put us out of business. A lot of them felt like they were helping us somehow.
Yeah.
And we were actually able to get a lot, especially in Florida, we were able to get a lot of input in and really help them, craft the laws.
That's it for this episode of I Love Tattooing. Sure hope you enjoyed it. Please check out our website, ilovetattooing.com, and leave us a comment or send us a suggestion. If there's a topic you'd like to hear us discuss or you want to give us some feedback, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. See you next time.